James Carville just made a fatal mistake in his entire political career. He attacked Karoline Leavitt live on air, calling her Trump's doll child, and thinking he had won for sure. Big mistake. Leavitt responded not just with words. She released files, emails, and video clips that silenced the entire meeting room. James Carville, please explain those emails calling on Obama and Clinton to intervene that I just presented. What happens next could change forever. The image of a political legend. Hit the like button because you're about to witness the most brutal political takedown in decades. A secret video is about to be released, and Carville's words will echo across the nation. Carville thought he was invincible. He was wrong. When you attack a young woman who dares to face all the evidence, you should prepare for a full counterattack. Is this the moment America witnesses the fall of an old icon, or just a passing scandal? You won't want to miss the answer. James Carville sat up straight, his sharp eyes fixed on Karoline Leavitt, as if he wanted to swallow her whole right in front of dozens of cameras broadcasting live across the country, and his opening remark made the atmosphere in the meeting room reverberate like the sound of a gavel. You're just a mouthpiece for Trump, inexperienced, knowing nothing about politics. Whispers spread through the room. Reporters bent down typing on keyboards, and congressmen slightly tilted their heads as if awaiting the counterpunch. Karoline Leavitt, in her light-colored suit standing out amid a sea of dark ones, didn't blink, her gaze calm but taut, like a drawn bowstring, and that very composure made Carville pause for a beat. She gave a faint smile, then looked straight into the camera lens as if sending a message to the whole nation. If you think I'm just a mouthpiece, then let's see whose voice carries farther today. This wasn't a routine hearing, not the perfunctory questioning that Washington was all too familiar with. No, this was a premeditated political showdown, where an aging icon of the Democratic Party, once hailed as a master strategist, was facing off against a rising young face of the GOP, who was just in her 20s but already held the official spokesperson position for the president. The air in the crowded room thickened like it was congealing. Every glance, every soft cough becoming a signal of an impending explosion. Cameras panned constantly, journalists held their breath waiting, and social media outside was already buzzing, with hashtags about the Carville-Leavitt clash trending even before the hearing began. Everyone understood that this wasn't just a questioning session on media and elections, but a clash between the past and the future, between a once legendary strategist who had contradicted himself many times, and a new ambitious generation ready to shatter every stereotype. The Rayburn meeting room seemed to compress in a second of waiting, because everyone knew the first blast had only just begun, and what was about to unfold could shake the entire American political landscape. Carville didn't let the atmosphere settle. He leaned forward, his hand lightly slapping the polished wooden table, like a seasoned lawyer pressing charges against an opponent. Characteristically Southern American voice rang out clearly through the microphone. I've been through more than 4 decades on the political battlefield, putting an unknown governor like Bill Clinton into the White House, defeating giants that you're probably not old enough to fully understand. And today I sit here facing a girl just over 20, thinking she can stand toe-to-toe with me, just because Trump put her on the podium. He paused for a beat, his eyes flashing with his familiar confidence, then continued, "What is your track record, Miss Leavitt? Besides reading pre-written scripts for the press, besides repeating the same old tired slogans, have you ever done anything on your own to change history?" "I don't think so." A soft chuckle rose from the back rows, a few journalists exchanging amused glances, as if Carville was truly leading the game. He seized the atmosphere, his voice sharpening, each word like a knife slicing straight at his opponent. "I've helped dozens of candidates, domestic and international, step into power. I've sat in strategy rooms where every word could sway the fate of a nation. And you, Karoline, you're just a poster girls for a campaign that's all too familiar with lies and empty hype. You step up to the podium, smile for the cameras, repeat every word someone else wrote. That's not leadership. That's theater. And theater is for entertainment, not for governing the country." Carville paused, looking around the room as if to ensure every eye was on him. He let out a slight chuckle, the smug smile mixed with arrogance of someone accustomed to overwhelming opponents with his reputation alone. "Americans know who I am," he said, placing a hand on his chest like a stage actor. "I'm the guy who reshaped political messaging in the 90s. I'm the one who created the immortal slogan, 'It's the economy, stupid.' I'm the one who understands every nook and cranny of voter psychology. And now I have to waste my time sitting here listening to a little girl who hasn't even lived yet, thinking she's up to the challenge of taking me on." A burst of laughter erupted, Not from the whole room, but enough to create the sense that Carville was ahead. Reporters whispered, typing out headlines quickly. Carville mocks. Leavitt, legendary strategist, overpowers. Young spokesperson. The atmosphere in the room tilted toward him, like an experienced boxer who had just landed the first punch to control the fight's rhythm. Carville continued, his voice slowing, but each word growing heavier. Do you know what the most dangerous thing in politics is, Miss Leavitt? Delusion. And you're suffering from it right now. The delusion that being named by Trump makes you important. The delusion that a few rounds of applause from an enthusiastic crowd can turn you into a national leader. I've seen dozens of young faces swallowed by that delusion. And believe me, history will bury you just like it did them, leaving only memories of a time when you were used as a tool. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs, a satisfied smile spreading across his lips. Clearly, Carville believed he had established the power dynamic, putting Leavitt on the defensive from the very first minutes. The murmurs from the audience and the flash of reporters' cameras only made the scene feel like a stage set up for his solo performance. In one camera angle, his face appeared full of confidence, the deep wrinkles like badges of experience and power. But right across from him, Karoline Leavitt still sat straight-backed, her eyes unblinking, the corners of her mouth holding a thin smile. That composure was in complete contrast to Carville's arrogance. If anyone was perceptive, they would realize this wasn't a young woman overwhelmed. She was waiting for her moment, like a fighter patiently waiting for her opponent to overextend before countering. But at this point, all anyone saw was James Carville dominating with his barbs, while Leavitt sat quietly, letting her opponent think he had the upper hand. And it was in that very moment when it seemed Carville controlled everything that the atmosphere in the room tightened another notch, as if the entire audience could sense it. The real storm hadn't arrived yet. Leavitt sat silently after Carville's long attack, her face showing no sign of disturbance. On the contrary, that calm made many in the room start whispering, what would this young woman do to counter the old political icon who had just unleashed his opening salvo? Some reporters prepared to jot down a few more lines about Leavitt overpowered by Carville, but then they paused when they saw Karoline slowly pulling out a stack of papers from her briefcase, flipping to the right page and lifting her head to look straight at her opponent. Her voice rang out, not loud, not harsh, but sharp like a knife cutting through the atmosphere. Mr. Carville, I don't need to boast about my achievements to respond to you. Instead, let your own words speak for me. The entire room held its breath. Leavitt looked down at the paper, reading each word, each syllable, clearly as if to etch it into everyone's memory. Joe Biden is the most tragic figure in American political history that I've ever witnessed. The sound echoed off the walls, bouncing back, causing a flurry of reporters to look up. Some cameras flashed repeatedly. Several mouths hung open. James Carville still sat there, but his face twitched slightly. Everyone knew he had said this on television just a few months ago, but hearing it echoed here right before Congress turned it into undeniable living evidence. Leavitt didn't stop. She flipped to another page, her voice steady, her eyes still fixed on Carville. And here's more. You once said the Democratic Party lost men because, quoting verbatim, the women in the party are too fond of lecturing and acting superior. A wave of reactions swept through the room. Some female congresswomen frowned. A few female reporters exchanged irritated glances. Those who had clapped and chuckled along with Carville earlier now sat completely silent. Television cameras zoomed in on Carville's face. The arrogant smile from before was gone, replaced by a heavy frown. Leavitt set the papers down, clasping her hands on the table, then lifted her head to look straight ahead. Her voice was calm, but firm. You think you're attacking me, a young spokesperson for President Trump, but in truth, you're attacking your own president, attacking your own party. You're not discrediting me. You're undermining Joe Biden and the allies you once swore to protect. A heavy silence blanketed the room. No one clapped, no one laughed. Only the sound of typing keyboards and a few soft coughs remained. Everyone could feel the momentum shifting. Carville reached for his glass of water, taking a small sip, a seemingly normal action but under the camera lenses. It appeared as a sign of unease. Leavitt seized that moment to press further. The American people don't need me to list who James Carville is. They've seen you on TV for decades. They know you helped Bill Clinton win, but they also know you failed backing Kerry Hillary Bennett. And now, they're hearing you, not me. Call your own party's president tragic. Disparage the women in your ranks. Dismiss the very voters you once claimed to represent. That's not out of context, sir. That's the truth in its fullest context. The contradiction within you yourself. The room buzzed again. A few reporters typed out breaking news lines quickly. Leavitt quotes Carville's attacks on Biden. Television cameras caught Carville furrowing his brow, his lips pressed tight, his fingers tapping lightly on the table, a clear sign of tension. Carville tried to rally, his voice hoarser than usual. Miss Leavitt, you can pick a few out-of-context quotes to spin any story you want. The reality is, Leavitt tilted her head, interrupting with cold decisiveness. Out of context. You called your own president tragic. You disparaged the women in your party. You attacked the people you were supposed to protect. That's not out of context. That's the full picture of your contradictions. A loud ooh rose from the audience. Carville was interrupted, a rarity in his debate-filled career, and this time, he couldn't find a sharp retort to regain control. Leavitt sat up straight, not raising her voice, not trembling, just letting the facts do their work. And in that moment, everyone understood the tide had turned. James Carville, the master who had terrified so many opponents, was now being weighed down by his own words, while Karoline Leavitt, the young woman many had dismissed, was seizing the advantage before millions of American viewers. Carville was silent for a moment. After Leavitt's unexpected counterpunch, his hands clasped tightly across his chest, as if trying to swallow his irritation. He took a deep breath, then leaned toward the microphone, his voice raspy but still sharp. All right, Miss Leavitt, you can read back a few things I said in frustration for entertainment, but let me remind this entire room, we're not here just to quibble over words. We're here for transparency. And if we're talking transparency, you should be the last one claiming to be clean. The room erupted, reporters looking up, the scent of a counterattack beginning to spread. Carville straightened, his eyes flashing with the belief he still held control. Your campaign fund, like Mr. Trump's, is full of shady money. I have here a report from the Federal Election Commission. The money pouring into your campaign doesn't just come from loyal voters like you boast, but from PACs with a history of money laundering and politics. Tens of thousands of dollars, routed through intermediaries, then flowing into your pockets, as if no one would notice. He picked up a stack of papers, flipping through a few pages and reading aloud. Here, $50,000 from a PAC based in Florida, which is currently under federal investigation for financial fraud. There, $120,000 from a fund sponsored by an anonymous billionaire, which everyone knows is an extension of the oil lobby's arm. And more, $200,000 from a group whose former employees themselves admit is a front to funnel money from foreign donors. Each number rang out like a hammer strike, causing many in the room to lean forward. Reporters typed furiously, preparing headlines. Carville exposes Leavitt's finances. A few cameras zoomed in on Karoline's face, waiting for signs of her crumbling, or at least confusion. But she sat still, her hands on the table, her eyes never leaving her opponent. Carville continued, his voice rising, as if getting carried away before the crowd. You call yourself the voice of a new generation, the clean image of the GOP. But how do you explain your campaign being mired in non-transparent money? How dare you stand here before the American people, talking about justice and truth, when your fundraising budget is nothing but a tangled mess of hidden power? He leaned back, chuckling contemptuously. I've been in this game too long to be fooled by a confident smile or eyes staring straight into the camera. I know what a clean campaign looks like, and what one selling out for money looks like. And believe me, Karoline Leavitt, yours is the latter. The room fell silent for a few beats. This was the attack many thought would fell the young woman. Financial allegations are always a deadly weakness in politics, because they often lead to a barrage of hard-to-answer questions. Some reporters had already started typing definitive headlines. Carville puts Leavitt on the spot. Financial allegations shadow rising GOP star. Every lens zoomed in on Karoline's face, waiting for a forced smile, a panicked glance, or a stammering response. Because just that would cause her spectacular counterattack from earlier to collapse right here.
The atmosphere thickened.
People could hear the clear sound of pens tapping on tables, chairs shifting slightly, even hurried camera clicks. Carville sat there, his eyes gleaming with the familiar satisfaction of a wily veteran who had toppled opponents many times with words alone. He believed this blow would throw Leavitt off rhythm, but Karoline Leavitt still hadn't spoken. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes bright under the meeting room lights, like a young animal unafraid before an old wolf. She knew everyone was watching, waiting, and she also knew one wrong word would cost everything. Reporters stared at the microphone in front of her, ready to capture every syllable. The entire room held its breath, waiting for Leavitt's reaction, the air taut like a string about to snap. And it was in that silence that everyone understood the real storm hadn't arrived yet. Because if James Carville had just unleashed his strongest card with all his might, then Karoline Leavitt's response could be the moment that defined the entire hearing. In the few seconds after Carville unloaded his numbers and allegations, the atmosphere in the meeting room felt pinned in place. Reporters glanced at each other, everyone thinking Karoline Leavitt had been pushed to the brink, just waiting for her to stumble. But instead of panicking, Leavitt simply lifted the thick folder in front of her, flipping through the pages slowly and deliberately. Her movement was like a young lawyer preparing to present the final evidence in a trial, and it made Carville instinctively lean back, his eyes narrowing in caution. Her voice rang out, not loud but firm, each word emphasized like a hammer blow. "Mr. Carville, you say my fund is shady, that I sold myself for money, so let the American people see the truth about you." She held up a stack of papers, printed with the logo of the International Election Monitoring Committee, then slammed it down on the table. "This is the political consulting contract you signed with a party in Serbia, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, right after you left the Clinton campaign. Here's another in Israel, then a series of deals in South America, where you took money to train local candidates on how to polish their images and manipulate the media." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Cameras flashed repeatedly. Carville's face flushed slightly, the corners of his mouth tightening, but Leavitt didn't stop. She flipped to another folder, this one marked with red tabs. "You once boasted about advising over 20 campaigns abroad, but did you mention that many of them involved governments accused of human rights violations? Did you disclose that you took money from South American tycoons to refine messagings to keep them in power?" The tension ratcheted up notch by notch. Some congressmen in the back shook their heads. A few reporters looked at each other in disbelief. Carville inhaled sharply, trying to regain his usual calm tone. "That was legitimate work. I'm a political consultant, and I work internationally like hundreds of others in this business." Leavitt didn't let him build a defense. She tilted her head, her voice icy sharp. "You call me a mouthpiece, a tool of Trump. But you, the one who preached about ethics, about civic responsibility, sold your influence to anyone willing to pay. From Serbia to Israel, from Venezuela to Colombia. You say I'm shady? No, Mr. Carville. You're the embodiment of turning politics into a commodity. You're the one who sold your influence." That blow struck like a twist to the heart. Carville shook his head, trying to block it with a forced laugh. "You're just making things up. This is a smear job staged to discredit me." But his voice trembled slightly, not as steady as usual. The cameras captured every expression, a Carville losing the confidence that was his strongest weapon. Leavitt continued ramping up the pressure. She emphasized each example. "You received over $900,000 to advise a campaign in South America, which was later criticized internationally for election fraud. Do you want to explain that? Do you want to tell the American people why a Democratic strategist spent his time and intellect protecting those who trampled democracy abroad?" The room filled with sharp murmurs. Reporters from CNN, Fox, MSNBC all turned to whisper to each other. Clearly, this was the moment no one had anticipated. Carville, the legendary Rajin Cajun, being cornered by a 27-year-old woman. Carville hurriedly responded, "I do the work of a consultant. It's a legitimate profession. Everything disclosed transparently." Leavitt immediately counterattacked, her voice razor sharp. "Legal doesn't mean ethical. Legal doesn't mean clean. You've taught your whole life that politics is for the people, but you've turned politics into a high-end service for whoever can pay the price. And today, you're sitting here lecturing me about transparency." The sound in the room exploded. Some people gasped audibly. A few Republican congressmen smiled in satisfaction, and many reporters scribbled furiously to get it into the breaking news. Every word Leavitt said echoed, unwavering, while Carville was clearly flustered, his eyes blinking rapidly, his hands tapping a rhythm on the table, as if searching for an escape. This wasn't just a counterpunch, it was a perfect pivot. If earlier Leavitt had hit Carville with his own contradictory words about Biden and the Democratic Party, now she presented specific files, specific numbers, turning him into the symbol of hypocrisy. Carville tried to regain the upper hand, his voice higher than usual, almost shrill. "Don't think you can turn me into a criminal. I've worked with top candidates, recognized governments, No one can deny those accomplishments. Leavitt didn't raise an eyebrow, just leaned back in her chair slightly, her lips curving faintly. What are your accomplishments, Mr. Carville? Turning the sharpness of American politics into an export commodity, teaching dictators how to manipulate the media, or using your name to shield dirty campaigns. You call me shady, but the truth is, I've never sold my voice to any foreign power. I represent the voice of the American people. And you, who do you represent? In that moment, the entire room fell silent. Carville's lips moved, but no words came out. The image on the large screen broadcasting live showed clearly that he was flustered, his denials flying away, leaving only helplessness. And that framed the impression for millions of viewers watching. Karoline Leavitt not only stood firm against the financial attack, but turned it into an opportunity to expose Carville's past, making him look like someone outdated, contradictory, and no longer credible to lecture. The atmosphere in the room had tilted fully toward Karoline Leavitt after she unleashed the series of files on Carville's international consulting. But she knew that to truly take down the Raggan Cajun right there, she needed a blow he couldn't spin away with any argument. Karoline slowly pulled out her tablet from her bag, her fingers swiping across the touchscreen. All the lenses immediately focused on her. She looked up, her voice calm but authoritative. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a video. It's not something I wrote. It's not an accusation from the opposition. It's Mr. Carville himself, in his own voice, from an interview just a few months ago. She pressed play. The large screen in the hearing room lit up. The image of Carville appeared, smirking into the lens of a popular podcast. His voice rang out clearly. The Democratic Party lost men because the women in the party are too fond of lecturing, too fond of acting superior to them. The entire room erupted. Murmurs, gasps roared like waves crashing. Some female congresswomen in the back rows shot sharp glances at Carville. Reporters nearly jumped up, cameras flashing non-stop, phones recording to send the clip out immediately. On Twitter and TikTok, just minutes later, the hashtag #CarvilleOnWomen started climbing straight to the top. Carville sat motionless, his face suddenly paling. He knew he had said those words himself. He had justified it in the media as straight talk in Cajun style. But in this context, before millions watching, that excuse became meaningless. Leavitt looked straight at him, her eyes piercing. Mr. Carville, you're not just attacking me, you're attacking American women. You belittle the people who have contributed crucially to this democracy, from voting rights to leadership roles. You mock them, demean them, and then you sit here lecturing me about transparency. The noise grew even louder. An MSNBC female reporter turned to her colleague, whispering, "This will be viral in hours." He just shot himself in the foot. Carville tried to regain control, leaning toward the microphone, his voice trembling. "This clip is edited, taken out of context. What I meant," Leavitt interrupted immediately, not giving him a chance to defend. "No out of context at all. This is verbatim. This is how you view women. And I'm not surprised, because you've spent your entire career attacking others, belittling the younger generation, belittling women in the very party you claim loyalty to." A roar of oohs rose again. Some Republican congressmen nodded, while several Democratic faces covered their foreheads in disbelief at what was unfolding. Carville, the man who had made so many opponents sweat with his sharp tongue, was now being choked by his own words. Leavitt leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "You called the women in your party lecturing, superior. So let me ask, who are you sitting here in front of? Me, a young woman, a new mother, back at work just 10 days after giving birth, in front of millions of American women every day fighting for their families, their jobs, their children's future. You dare say they are a burden, the reason your party lost men. Mr. Carville, that's not straight talk, that's an insult." Every word she said was like a strike to an open wound. Carville's lips moved, trying to say something, but the angry whispers from the audience swallowed his voice. The Democratic female congresswoman behind him showed clear discomfort. While many female reporters began drafting quick headlines, Leavitt plays clip of Carville attacking women, hearing room shaken. Outside, the clip was already spreading. Major Twitter accounts shared it with captions. "Carville calls Democratic women lecturing, exposed by Leavitt right in Congress." On TikTok, a clip of Carville's shocking statement, overlaid with Leavitt's icy face, had racked up hundreds of thousands of views in just 15 minutes. Leavitt set the tablet down, her voice low but firm. "Mr. Carville, I may be a new name, I may not have 40 years of experience, like you. But one thing is certain, I will never turn my back on American women. I will never stand before the nation and say they are the reason a political party fails. You did that, and today, this entire country is hearing your words again." The room exploded into a storm of sound. Some congressmen tried banging the gavel for order, but clearly couldn't contain the aftershocks. The lenses zoomed in on Carville, his face flushed red, his hands trembling slightly, his eyes blinking rapidly. He, the old fox of American politics, once considered a master turner of tides, was now the one caught in the inescapable vortex he had created. The media had their moment they'd been waiting for. Some journalists whispered to each other, "This is the knockout blow. He won't recover." Leavitt leaned back, needing no more words. She knew that clip alone was enough to demolish the wall of fame Carville had built over decades. And by making it the centerpiece of the hearing, she sent a resounding message: arrogance, insulting women, no matter if spoken by a legend, would never be forgiven. After the clip of Carville attacking women in the party was replayed, the atmosphere in the room still vibrated like the aftermath of a massive explosion. Congressmen buzzed, reporters fidgeted in their seats, and social media had blown up with hashtags spreading everywhere. But Karoline Leavitt wasn't done yet. She knew this was the time to deliver the pivotal question, a twist of the knife right into her opponent's deepest weakness. She leaned toward the microphone, her eyes icy, her voice steady but fiery. "Mr. Carville, I have a very simple question. You've publicly said that Joe Biden shouldn't run for re-election, that his continuing to run would be a tragic mistake for America. So today, as you sit here attacking me, who are you defending? Are you defending Biden, or are you defending your own contradictory ego?" The room shook. Some Republican congressmen raised their eyebrows in delight. A few reporters bent down to jot down every word, knowing it would be quoted across evening news broadcasts. Carville flinched slightly, sitting up straighter, his hands clasping together. His eyes darted quickly to the audience, then back to the table, as if searching for an exit. He cleared his throat, trying to regain confidence. I expressed concerns, yes, about President Biden running for re-election, but that was a strategic opinion in a specific context. Everyone knows I'm straightforward. I say what I think is best for the party. Leavitt didn't blink, smiling faintly. A strategic opinion. You call publicly smearing your own president on television a strategic opinion. Carville adjusted the microphone with his hand, his voice rising, somewhat out of control. "No, I didn't smear. I was just analyzing. As a strategist, my job is to assess win-loss chances. When I said Mr. Biden shouldn't run for re-election, it wasn't because I don't respect him, but because I wanted to ensure the party had the best shot at beating Trump." Whispers spread through the room. Some journalists shook their heads, smiling sarcastically. Carville's roundabout way of distinguishing between smearing and analyzing only made him seem more lost. Leavitt quickly ramped up the pressure. "Let me make sure I understand. You said Mr. Biden shouldn't run for re-election, that he'd be a disaster. But today, you're sitting here claiming to defend the administration, defend the Democratic Party. So ultimately, who are you defending? Biden or just the reputation of James Carville, who never admits he's wrong?" Carville grimaced, his hands clenching tightly. He breathed heavily. "I've never called the president a disaster. I said the situation could be difficult if he ran in a context with many unfavorable factors. That's the difference." Leavitt tilted her head, her voice sharpening like a blade. "Difference. You used the term tragic figure, the most tragic figure in American politics. I just read it aloud in front of you. You didn't deny it. So how do you plan to cover it up today? Do you want to say you didn't mean it, or do you want to say the country misheard?" The hearing room filled with a loud ooh. Carville's face reddened, his lips quivering. He shook his head. I was quoted out of proportion. People just take part of my words to create a negative impression." Leavitt smiled, her eyes gleaming. "No, Mr. Carville. People don't need to edit anything. I just played the full clip. This entire country heard you say it yourself. No cuts, no additions. That was you. And today you can't escape your own words." A Democratic congresswoman behind Carville's side, gently dropping her head into her hand. A few reporters typed furiously, "Leavitt traps Carville in contradiction with Biden himself." Carville tried to rally, his voice weaker than usual. "I just want the party to win. That's all. Sometimes, in analysis, my words can be stronger than intended, but my loyalty has never changed. Leavitt immediately twisted further. Loyalty. Loyalty. To whom? To the party when you disparage the women in that very party, to the president when you call him tragic, or to the strategist chair you've clung to for 40 years. The American people deserve the truth, Mr. Carville. They deserve to know that the man who calls himself a political master is actually stammering before the simplest question, who are you defending today? In that moment, Carville fell silent, with no convincing answer left. He leaned back in his chair, his face slightly flushed, his eyes downcast. The room buzzed with excited murmurs. The cameras zoomed in on Leavitt's face, radiant with unshakable confidence. In under 10 minutes, the young woman who had been dismissed had turned the seasoned icon into a flustered old man, contradictory in his own words, and the entire room understood that Carville had just been pushed into a gotcha question, one where any answer would only lose him more points. The room was still murmuring after the gotcha question when Leavitt didn't give Carville time to breathe. She sat up straight, her voice clear and emphatic, stressing every word. Mr. Carville, you say you're here to defend the party, defend tradition, but let the American people remember your real track record. Here hailed for taking Bill Clinton from an obscure governor to president in 1992. Yes, that was a resounding victory. But what about after that? The entire hearing room seemed to hush, then all eyes focused on her. Leavitt flipped to a marked page in her document, listing clearly, John Kerry in 2004. You were one of the strategic advisors. Result, defeat to George W. Bush. Hillary Clinton in 2008. You helped coordinate the messaging. Result, beaten by Barack Obama in the primaries. Hillary Clinton 2016. You appeared on TV almost daily defending her, saying she'd make history. Result, a humiliating loss to Donald Trump. Then Michael Bennet in 2020. You backed him, praised him. Result, he didn't make it past the primaries. So what is your real legacy, Mr. Carville? A wave of buzz rose, a few reporters biting their lips to suppress bitter laughs. The cameras immediately panned to Carville. The old Cajun tried to maintain composure, but his eyes were clearly wavering. Leavitt didn't stop. Her voice grew stronger, like a prosecutor's indictment. You like to call yourself a legend, the #1 Democratic strategist. But history isn't just 1992. History includes all the failures you helped create. You've turned one victory into the sole exception, and the rest of your career, sorry to say it straight, is a long string of defeats. Carville opened his mouth, trying to interject. That's not fair. I wasn't directly running all those campaigns. Leavitt cut him off immediately, her hand tapping the table lightly, like a drum ending a beat. Right, you weren't directly running them, but you went on TV. You took credit as an advisor. You claimed glory in wins and denied responsibility in losses. You call me a mouthpiece. Mr. Carville, you're the mouthpiece. The mouthpiece of failure. You're the symbol of a past that's gone, not the future. That statement was like a slash, making the room explode. A collective ooh rang out. Some Republican congressmen nodding subtly in agreement, while many journalists looked at Carville as if waiting for a miracle counter. But there was no miracle. He just sat there, breathing rapidly, his hands clasped tightly. Leavitt pressed her advantage, her voice full of resolve. Americans are tired of hearing you talk about 1992. It's been 3 decades. All they see after that is a series of defeats. And now you're still sitting here, appointing yourself as a political teacher, when your own career is the clearest proof that you no longer understand this country. You're not a legendary strategist. You're a relic of the past. A silence fell. Sometimes silence echoes louder than cheers. All the camera lenses turned to Carville, the image of the silver-haired old man, wrinkled face, confused eyes, a complete contrast to the arrogant Carville at the start. Leavitt wrapped it up, her voice lowering, but no less powerful. The new generation of America won't learn from repeated failures. We'll learn from the truth, from real experience with the people. You had your moment of glory, but it's over now. You're no longer a symbol of victory. You're a symbol of obsolescence, of failure, and America doesn't need that anymore. The chatter erupted fiercely. On social media, tweets began appearing. Leavitt calls Carville a relic of the past. Clinton win was the exception, rest all failures. Video clips from the hearing quickly spread. overlaid with dramatic background music. Carville bowed his head, lips pressed tight, shoulders trembling slightly. This scene, for anyone who had watched him on TV for decades, was unbelievable. The old fox, who had terrified not a few politicians, was now knocked off his perch right in Congress by a 27-year-old woman, with meticulous preparation and words like hammer blows. In the public's eyes, Carville's image from legendary strategist had been redefined, not as a master anymore, but as a remnant of an era that had ended. And in this very moment, Karoline Leavitt had left an indelible mark in the political showdown of the century. The echo of the statement, "You're a symbol of failure, not the future," still reverberated in the room when James Carville suddenly shot up from his chair. His face flushed red, veins bulging in his neck, and his voice exploded like a storm. "I've been in this game before you were even born. You think you can sit there, in your 20s, teaching me how to do politics? You're nothing but Trump's doll child, a puppet in a skirt, put in front of the cameras to read words someone else wrote." His voice boomed through the room, so loud the microphone crackled from overload. A few congressmen jumped, a few reporters held their breath, and the cameras immediately zoomed in to capture every furious expression on the veteran strategist's face. Karoline Leavitt, in complete contrast, sat still. She didn't stand, didn't gesture wildly, didn't shout. Her eyes looked straight at Carville, calm, like a still lake in a storm. The corner of her mouth twitched slightly, as if his outburst only proved what she had just said. Carville was a relic of the past, no longer in control of himself. "Dull," Leavitt repeated, her voice lowering but loud enough for the microphone to pick up clearly. A man who spent his career yelling in people's faces now has to yell at a young woman to prove he still has power. "Is that your strength, Mr. Carville?" The entire room buzzed with murmurs. Some reporters turned to each other, shaking their heads. The contrast was stark. On one side was Carville, furious, shouting, his eyes wild. On the other was Leavitt, calm, steady, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. Carville slammed his hand on the table with a loud thud, yelling, "You have no experience. You know nothing about voters, about campaigns, about the brutality of American politics. You're just a kid fresh out of school, thinking a few press conferences can turn you into a politician." Leavitt didn't flinch. She tilted her head, her eyes gleaming with sharpness. "If I'm just a kid fresh out of school, then why is it that you, James Carville, the self-proclaimed legend, are losing your temper to the point of screaming at me? Perhaps the truth is, you're not angry at me. You're angry at yourself, because you know your generation has failed and is now being surpassed by the new one." Her response was like a knife, twisting deep. Carville opened his mouth, but couldn't immediately get a word out. Whispers spread through the room. The cameras zoomed in on both their faces. One flushed red, gesturing wildly in anger. The other cold, composed, exuding an authority that commanded the crowd's attention. A reporter whispered, "He's losing. It's clear he's losing." Carville tried to rally, his voice hoarse. "My generation led America through countless crises, countless victories. And where will your generation lead us? Into the hands of a dictator like Trump. You don't love America. You love the power Trump gave you." Leavitt shot back immediately, still calm. "I love America so much that I believe it needs change. It needs new faces, people not bound by a past of failures. You talk about victories, sorry, but Americans only remember the defeats. They remember Kerry losing, Hillary losing, Bennett vanishing, and they see you behind it all. You can yell, you can call me a doll, but that doesn't erase the truth. Your legacy isn't victory. It's failure after failure." A smattering of applause broke out from the audience seats, despite the gavel tapping for silence. The cameras immediately zoomed in on Leavitt, the young woman sitting steady, her eyes blazing, but her voice eerily calm. That contrast painted the full picture. Carville, angry, outdated, out of control. Leavitt poised, youthful, in complete command of the situation. Viewers watching the live broadcast felt the disparity clearly. Comments began flooding Twitter. Carville's losing his cool, Leavitt's ice cold. One side's yelling, the other's calm. Who's really leading here? Carville calls Leavitt a doll, but he's the one putting on a show. Carville tried to say more, but his voice broke, his words jumbled. In contrast, Leavitt just sat there, smiling, letting his outburst become the most compelling evidence. Carville's time was over. And in the eyes of millions of American viewers, this power struggle had a clear leader. The noise from Carville's furious outbursts still echoed when Karoline Leavitt leaned forward slightly, pulling a sealed envelope from her briefcase. The action instantly hushed the room. Anyone familiar with American politics knew, when a witness prepares to open an envelope in a hearing, it's usually a real bombshell inside. Leavitt placed the envelope on the table, gently peeling back the sealed flap, then slowly drew out a few printed sheets, stamped with a public archives seal. Her voice rang out, slow, clear, like a prosecutor presenting undeniable evidence. Mr. Carville, all morning, you've talked about loyalty. You scolded me as Trump's mouthpiece, a political puppet. You crowned yourself the defender of the Democratic Party. But here, I have an email from you, sent in July 2024, just months before the election. In this email, you urged former President Obama and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to pressure Joe Biden to withdraw from the race. You wrote, verbatim, "If we don't make a change, Biden will drag the whole party down with him. It's time for those with real influence to act." The room erupted in a frenzy. A few reporters jumped up, cameras flashing nonstop. Some congressmen whispered to each other, their faces showing clear shock. Carville paled, leaning toward the lawyer beside him, but none of them could deny the document being held up before the public. Leavitt placed the email on the table, then looked straight at him, her eyes icy. "You say you're loyal to Biden. You say you're loyal to the party, but this email shows what you're loyal to. Not people, not ideals, but power. You wanted to replace the sitting president just because you thought he was no longer useful for victory. You sold out your loyalty just to preserve your personal influence." The entire room fell dead silent, only the rapid tapping of reporters' keyboards audible. Carville's lips tightened, his hands visibly trembling. He tried to speak, but Leavitt gave him no chance. She pressed harder. "Mr. Carville, what did you once say? You were proud of putting Clinton in the White House, of understanding American voters better than anyone. But what happened after that? You failed time and time again. And now, in desperation, you were even ready to push your own party's sitting president out of the race. You're not loyal to anyone. You're loyal only to power. And today, you're still sitting here, preaching to others about ethics, while you betrayed your own allies." The cameras zoomed in on Carville's face. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His eyes darted wildly, his lips twitching as if to deny, but then he went silent. Some reporters smirked. This image was too perfect. Leavitt tilted her head, her voice lowering but stronger than ever. "You call me a doll, a puppet, but the truth is, you're the one obsessed with power to the point of betraying anyone. If it keeps your standing. You've betrayed Biden, betrayed the women in your party, betrayed the trust of voters. That's your real legacy." A massive ooh echoed through the room, some even laughing at the bluntness of this blow. Carville, once a legend, now sat speechless. He no longer yelled, no longer gestured. He sat silent, his shoulders slumping, as if all his strength had been drained. Reporters rushed to send breaking news. Leavitt releases Carville's email, urging Obama and Clinton to force Biden out. New hashtags exploded. #Carville emails, #Leavitt knockout. The clip of Carville sitting motionless as Leavitt read the email spread at lightning speed. In the room, the silence after Leavitt's accusation echoed louder than any shouting before. She didn't need to yell, didn't need dramatic gestures. Just one short sentence was enough to frame the image. Carville wasn't a loyal defender, but an opportunist, Leavitt concluded, her voice steady, her eyes not leaving her opponent. "Mr. Carville, you've had 40 years in politics. You've been through every election, every campaign. But you know as well as I do, this moment will be the end. Because Americans have seen who you really are, not a legendary strategist, but someone who bends with the wind, loyal not to the party, not to the president, but only to power, and America doesn't need another fake icon like that." Carville hung his head, silent. The gavel banged, urging the room to maintain order, but it was too late. The fight had a loser. The room was still hushed after Carville's email was read aloud, and the image of him sitting speechless spread like ink on white paper. The cameras panned from his bowed head to Karoline Leavitt, the young woman sitting across, her eyes blazing and calm as if she had known this outcome all along. But Leavitt understood this was the decisive moment, the time not only to defeat her opponent, but to define her own image before the nation. She leaned slightly toward the microphone, her voice low but resonating through the room. They call me too young, not experienced enough. But let me tell you who I am. I'm an American woman, a new mother, and just 10 days after giving birth, I returned to this work. The work I believe is the highest responsibility, serving the country. The room held its breath. A few reporters blinked, their fingers pausing on keyboards. That image, a young mother, just through the most sacred personal moment of her life, yet choosing to stand and continue the political fight, was the complete opposite of James Carville's tired, aging face, shrinking across from her. Leavitt continued, her voice growing stronger, each word forged in fire. My generation doesn't have the luxury of resting on old glories. My generation has to raise children and nurture hope for the country. We don't have 40 years to repeat failures. We only have today to prove that America still has the strength to change. Some Republican congressmen nodded subtly. A few reporters sat silent, eyes fixed on the young woman. Carville looked up, his eyes weary, lips pressed tight. The image of him, once hailed as the Ragin Cajun, now only a bitter, powerless figure against the rise of a new generation. Leavitt paused for a beat, then turned to the audience, speaking slowly, as if wanting every heart to hear. Mr. Carville, you've spent your career teaching others how to win elections. You taught them how to count votes, spin the media, defeat opponents, but you never taught anyone the most important thing of all, how to keep the trust of the people. And that's why you're sitting here today, bitter, contradictory, and abandoned by the very allies you claim to represent. A collective ooh rang out, louder than any before. Reporters typed furiously. Leavitt lands defining blow. Carville never taught anyone to keep the people's trust. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the moment, her sharp eyes and slight resolute smile. Carville tried to speak, but only managed scattered sounds, no coherent sentence. He knew any word now would only worsen things, so he stayed silent, head bowed, hands trembling slightly. That image, a man once a symbol of power, now lost before a young woman, was the vivid illustration of the generational shift Leavitt had just painted. Leavitt leaned back, saying no more. She didn't need to. This moment spoke for itself. Americans watching their screens saw the stark contrast. One side, an outdated past, full of bitterness, contradiction, and failure. The other, the future, a young woman, a mother, a politician full of resolve, ready to take on responsibility. Outside, social media erupted. Leavitt's quotes flooded everywhere. My generation doesn't have 40 years to fail. We only have today to change. You taught others to win elections, but never how to keep the people's trust. Hashtags #new generation and #Leavitt. Carville shot to the top of national trends. TV analysts shook their heads in amazement, many calling this Karoline Leavitt's career-defining moment. In the room, the gavel banged again, but this time not to restore order. It rang like a historical marker. The fight was over. Carville, the man who once instilled fear with his sharp tongue, sat silent, while Leavitt shone as the face of a new era. And from that moment, everyone knew this was no longer just a hearing. This was a defining moment, the moment an old generation bowed out, and a new one stepped onto America's political stage. The final echo of the statement, "You taught others to win elections, but never how to keep the people's trust," still resonated. As James Carville hung his head, silent, he no longer countered, no longer shouted, no longer smirked as he had in the opening minutes. The silence wasn't a tactic. It was complete defeat. The image of a monument crumbling before the eyes of millions watching live. Just seconds later, the room erupted like a theater bursting into applause. Murmurs, ringing phones, rapid keyboard clacking. Reporters looked up, exchanging fiery glances as if they had just witnessed something unprecedented. The camera zoomed in on Carville's stunned face, then shifted to Karoline Leavitt's confident smile. The contrast instantly became an iconic frame. Outside, social media exploded like an earthquake. The hashtag #Leavitt destroys Carville shot to the #1 global trend in just 10 minutes. Short clips from the hearing were edited, set to dramatic music, and spread across TikTok and Twitter. The first meme appeared, Carville's shocked face, eyes lost, captioned, "When your past catches you on live TV." Meanwhile, Leavitt's faint smile as she lowered the microphone became a new symbol. People edited images of her sitting upright, calmly smiling, with captions like "The future has arrived." On Instagram, countless political fan pages posted the image with her resounding quote, "You taught others to win elections, but never how to keep the people's trust." In the room, some Republican congressmen clapped softly, despite calls for silence. A few Democratic congressmen covered their faces, avoiding the cameras. The chair banged the gavel repeatedly, but to no avail. The aftershock of Leavitt's knockout blow was too great to contain. The atmosphere felt like a concert hitting its climax, where the audience couldn't stay still. Carville remained seated, his hands trembling, his eyes vacant. A New York Times reporter whispered, "I've seen him win dozens of debates, but I've never seen him lose like this." Another from Fox News smirked, whispering to a colleague, "This is the clip that'll be replayed for a decade." Online, the content stream seemed unstoppable. A popular account edited Carville yelling, calling Leavitt a doll with her calmly sitting and smiling, set to comedic background music. The clip hit 500,000 views in an hour. Another account posted Carville's stunned face, next to Leavitt's smile, captioned, "This is the exact second the old guard crumbled." Even neutral commentators had to concede. A political scholar tweeted, "No doubt about it, Leavitt had her moment of a lifetime." Carville, known for controlling crowds, is now completely silent. The new generation has spoken. In the hallway outside, reporters crowded, each preparing questions for the break. Some TV journalists broadcast live on the spot, commenting hotly, "We're witnessing one of the rarest political knockouts in TV history." James Carville, the Rajam Cajun, has no words left, and Karoline Leavitt, a spokesperson in her 20s, just brought him down before the public's eyes. Viewers at home flooded comments. On YouTube, the live stream of the hearing overflowed with remarks. "Leavitt just rewrote political history. Carville's old. He can't keep up with this generation anymore. I'm not a GOP fan, but today Leavitt proved she's a real contender." In the room itself, the contrast grew sharper. On one side, Carville, a once legend, now stunned, no longer resisting. On the other, Leavitt smiling calmly, needing no more words, as the crowd finished her work, turning her blow into a viral victory. A veteran reporter whispered, "I was in the press room when Nixon fell, when Hillary stumbled in 2016. But this moment, right before our eyes, Carville collapsing before a new generation, it carries that same energy." The chair kept banging the gavel, finally restoring some order, but no one in the room remained neutral. They knew this had gone beyond a hearings framework. It had become a global political media event, where the image of a once legendary man was completely defeated by a young woman in a battle of words. And as Carville sat silent, Leavitt just smiled, her eyes fixed on the camera. She knew that smile, in the hours to come, would appear on every cover, every social media feed, every evening news broadcast. Because at this moment, the world had a new symbol of change. When the wooden gavel finally struck to close the morning hearing, the aftershock didn't stay within the room's four walls. It spilled out, flooding TV airwaves and social media, becoming the focal point of American political life that day. Major news channels cut their regular programming to focus on the showdown that had just unfolded. On CNN, Anderson Cooper appeared in a special broadcast. Behind him was a close-up image of the moment. Leavitt smiled while Carville hung his head, his eyes dazed. Anderson began in his familiar, warm, steady voice. "We've just witnessed one of those rare political moments that can alter the careers of both figures. A new generation has declared its independence." Karoline Leavitt, 27 years old, the youngest White House spokesperson in history, faced off and defeated a Democratic Party icon live on air. He continued his analysis. "What's remarkable isn't just the words, but the contrast." Carville lost control, shouting, calling his opponent a doll. Meanwhile, Leavitt remained composed, armed with evidence, and delivered devastating blows using his own words, emails, and contradictory legacy. It was a generational shift laid bare in the clearest way. On Fox News, Tucker Carlson couldn't hide his excitement. He opened his evening show with a clip of Leavitt reading Carville's email, then landing the line, "You're not loyal to anyone, you're only loyal to power." Tucker chuckled and said, "Karoline Leavitt just tore down the last icon of the Democratic Party." James Carville was once hailed as a master strategist, unbeatable in debates. But today he sat silent, stunned, before a young woman he had dismissed. If this isn't a sign of a generational shift in American politics, I don't know what is. The Fox News audience applauded in the studio, and the channel's social media exploded with hashtags supporting Leavitt. Comments poured in, "She's the future of the GOP. A new generation has risen." MSNBC, despite trying to defend Carville, couldn't ignore the power of the moment. Rachel Maddow, in her evening broadcast, replayed the clip of Carville shouting, calling Leavitt a doll, then analyzed. This was a grave mistake. Carville let his emotions take over, and that image is indelible in the public's memory. Meanwhile, Leavitt, by staying calm and countering with facts, completely owned the stage. Rachel admitted, this was a media triumph for Leavitt, no matter which side you're on. It wasn't just the news channels. Social media was flooded with memes and clips. On TikTok, a video splicing Carville shouting with Leavitt's calm smile hit 1 million views in hours. On Twitter, countless political accounts shared the punchline. You taught others to win elections, but never how to keep the people's trust, as a historic quote. A commentator on Politico wrote, Carville entered the hearing with the aura of the past, but Leavitt turned him into a symbol of obsolescence. This wasn't just a debate. It was a ceremony of power transfer from the old generation to the new. On YouTube, the hearings replay shot to the top of trending. Thousands of comments flooded the video. Carville's outdated. Leavitt just proved she's not just a spokesperson, but a true political warrior. I'm not a Republican, but I have to admit, Leavitt was phenomenal. The moment Carville went silent, that's when history was written. Even journalists who had criticized Leavitt had to concede. A Washington Post columnist tweeted, I didn't expect to write this, but today Leavitt showed the grit few young politicians have. Carville didn't lose because of his age, but because he couldn't face his own contradictions. Within 24 hours, Leavitt appeared on every major political news outlet. International outlets like BBC, Reuters, and Al Jazeera ran headlines. Leavitt takes down Carville in explosive Washington hearing. In Paris, a French newspaper called her the new face of the GOP with a steel style. In Tokyo, Japanese television analyzed, this is a rare example of a young politician completely defeating a veteran icon. Carville, in contrast, vanished from the media for hours. No official statements, no damage control interviews. His old allies stayed silent, letting his stunned image spread. Online, some mocked. Carville finally learned to stay quiet. Too bad it's too late. The hearing ended, but its aftershocks were just beginning. The media described it not just as a personal defeat, but the end of an era. And simultaneously, it was the birth of a new one, where Karoline Leavitt emerged as a symbol of the younger generation, of change, and of a political style no longer suppressed by the shouting of the past. As the media storm raged, in Congress and within both parties, political undercurrents began to surface. The Democrats were visibly rattled. James Carville, once the Ragin' Cajun, legendary strategist, who helped put Bill Clinton in the White House, had become a liability. Some Democratic congressmen appeared on TV trying to defend him, claiming Carville was just being candid about what everyone thinks privately. But the tone rang hollow and couldn't overshadow his dazed image in the hearing room. Others chose complete silence, dodging reporters' questions, as if hoping the media storm would pass. However, this silence only fueled public discontent. On social media, progressive voters fiercely criticized Carville. He no longer represents us. He insulted women, turned his back on Biden, and now he's silent. Some women's rights groups issued official statements, demanding the Democratic Party distance itself from Carville and his outdated views. Instead of defending Carville, the party's awkwardness only made him seem like an indefensible burden. Meanwhile, the Republican Party erupted in celebration. GOP congressmen universally praised Karoline Leavitt, calling her the new star of the GOP. Kevin McCarthy tweeted, the younger generation proved its mettle. Karoline Leavitt is the voice America needs. Elise Stefanik, once Leavitt's political mentor, appeared on Fox News, beaming with pride. I've watched Karoline grow in politics, and today, she showed the nation she can take down anyone. Conservative voter groups seized the moment. Clips of Leavitt exposing Carville's email or delivering the punchline. You taught others to win elections, but never how to keep the people's trust were replayed at fundraising events. Within 48 hours, the GOP campaign fund reported millions in small donations, most accompanied by notes, for Karoline, who took down Carville. In the press, analysts didn't hesitate to call Carville finished. Politico wrote, a political legend, self-destructed on camera. The Wall Street Journal opined, if Carville was still an icon, today he became a symbol of a past Americans don't want to return to. Even within the Democratic Party, Some veterans began openly criticizing him. A former Democratic senator stated, "Carville was once a powerful voice, but now he only brings division. Clinging to him only costs us more credibility." These voices, though few, reflected reality. Carville was no longer seen as irreplaceable. In contrast, Karoline Leavitt emerged from the storm as a new icon. The media called her the one who turned the hearing into a stage for the new generation. On talk shows, from Anderson Cooper to Tucker Carlson, her name was everywhere. Whether praised or critiqued, she was at the center. This prominence transformed Leavitt from a White House spokesperson to a name mentioned as a future congressional candidate or even for higher roles. An NBC political commentator noted, "The GOP may have found its heir. Meanwhile, the Democrats just lost one of their most seasoned voices." This contrast wasn't just a debate. It was a microcosm of the generational shift unfolding in American politics. Backstage, Carville left the hearing room looking stunned, escorted quickly by aides to avoid cameras. But the lenses caught up. That image, Carville hunched over, eyes vacant, graced the front pages of many newspapers the next morning. The headline was blunt, "The End of a Legend." Meanwhile, Leavitt stepped out into a swarm of reporters, smiling, saying little. Just one simple line, "I didn't come here to beat anyone. I came to speak the truth." That sentence instantly became the lead headline across multiple outlets, widely shared as a succinct message for the entire event. For the Democrats, Carville became an awkward burden. Defending him was seen as outdated. Abandoning him was seen as betraying an icon. For the Republicans, Leavitt became a new ace, a living testament to the message the new GOP generation has arrived. And in the eyes of Americans, the comparison was stark. Carville, old, bitter, stunned. Leavitt, young, calm, resolute. That contrast shaped how history would record it. This wasn't just a hearing, but the moment a new generation stepped into the light, while the old exited the stage in silence. After that fateful hearing, Washington was no longer the same. The next day, the front pages of most major newspapers juxtaposed the contrasting images. James Carville, head bowed, dazed, hurrying out of the hearing room. Karoline Leavitt, sitting upright, confident smile, eyes blazing before dozens of cameras. Just looking at those two photos, people understood the outcome. One political generation had closed, and a new one had officially taken the stage. Financial reports released 48 hours later reinforced this truth. Leavitt's support fund recorded a record-breaking sum, over $3 million in small donations from across the states, mostly from people who had never donated politically before. Each $20 or $30 contribution, totaling hundreds of thousands of donations, sent a clear message. Leavitt had touched the hearts of a new voter class. The media dubbed it the Leavitt effect, the effect of a young, candid face daring to confront old icons. Meanwhile, James Carville completely vanished from the media. No more interviews, no more fiery commentary on CNN or MSNBC, as he had done for years. His old allies avoided mentioning his name. A few outlets tried to reach him for a response, but his office only offered a curt, no comment. In politics, that silence was tantamount to admitting defeat. The reputation he built over 40 years crumbled in a single morning. Even those who once admired Carville couldn't deny it. He was too old, too bitter, too tethered to past glories. Against a young figure like Leavitt, the generational divide was undeniable. He shouted, raged, contradicted himself. She was calm, armed with evidence, and had a clear message. That contrast defined how the public saw it. Carville, a relic of the past. Leavitt, the face of the future. In the days that followed, evening talk shows dissected every detail. Anderson Cooper called it a rare generational handover, witnessed live. Tucker Carlson declared, "No one can live on the past forever. The future belongs to those who dare to stand up." And today, Leavitt did just that. Rachel Maddow, from a Democratic perspective, conceded, Leavitt owned the stage in a way few her age could. Social media comments didn't stop. Thousands of memes, short videos, and standout quotes flooded the internet. Images of Carville's stunned face next to Leavitt's smile were captioned, "Old guard crumbles, new guard rises." A prominent account wrote, "The last time we saw a shift this seismic was when Obama took the stage in 2004. Today, Karoline Leavitt had that moment." In political circles, GOP congressmen quickly seized the opportunity. They appeared with Leavitt at events, praising her as proof of the GOP's new vitality. Meanwhile, some Democrats quietly admitted Carville had become a liability. "We can't keep relying on old voices forever," an anonymous congressman told Politico. "People want truth, not bitter defenses." Leavitt, however, didn't gloat. In follow-up interviews, she emphasized, "This wasn't my victory. It was a victory for truth. Americans deserve leaders who don't just talk, but keep the people's trust." That line quickly became a widely shared slogan. And then, the most iconic moment came at the end of the week, when Leavitt appeared outside the White House for an impromptu press conference. Dozens of reporters swarmed, microphones crowding. She stepped out, needing no script, in her familiar light-colored suit. The sunlight shone down, making her face glow before the cameras. A reporter asked, "Karoline, what's the biggest message from your showdown with James Carville?" Leavitt smiled, lifted her head, and answered firmly, "The message is simple. No one can live on the past forever. The future belongs to those who dare to stand up. And truth, with the new generation, will always win." Cheers erupted from the crowd gathered outside. Reporters raised their cameras in unison, capturing the moment. In that instant, Karoline Leavitt was no longer just the young White House spokesperson. She had become a symbol for a new generation, one that dares to confront, challenge, and change. James Carville, in contrast, quietly retreated from the media. No more talk show appearances, no more political commentary. History will still note he put Clinton in the White House, but the public's most recent memory of him is his stunned face before a young woman. A sad end to a long career, but also a bitter reminder. In American politics, the past isn't enough to shield anyone from the truth and the new generation. The story closed, but its echoes lingered. In political science classes, in media workshops, this showdown will be cited as a lesson. No icon is untouchable, and no past can substitute for truth and the people's trust. The confrontation between Karoline Leavitt and James Carville in this narrative wasn't just a tense political debate, but a mirror reflecting the generational shift in American public life. The specific details highlighted this transition. Carville, once celebrated as the Raggin' Cajun, started with overconfident swagger, attacking Leavitt as a doll child and boasting about his legacy of putting Bill Clinton in the White House. But Leavitt didn't waver. She calmly read back Carville's controversial statements, from calling Joe Biden a tragic figure to remarking that Democratic women are too fond of lecturing. Those undeniable pieces of evidence, especially when replayed through a viral video clip, turned Carville's advantage into a massive liability. The climax came when Leavitt revealed his email to Obama and Clinton urging them to force Biden out, then sealed it with the scathing line, "You're not loyal to anyone. You're only loyal to power." Carville fell silent, stunned before the nation, while Leavitt cemented herself with the iconic statement, "You taught others to win elections, but never how to keep the people's trust." The lesson here for Americans and their leaders is clear. In a democracy, true strength lies not in past glories or reputation, but in the ability to face the truth and maintain public trust. Carville failed not because he lacked experience, but because he forgot that people want integrity, not tactics. Leavitt won not just because she was young or eloquent, but because she represented a new spirit, resolute, transparent, and daring to challenge old icons. The final message to America is no one can live on the past forever. The future belongs to those who stand up for the truth. Thank you for following this historic showdown in full. If you believe truth and the new generation deserve to be amplified, please hit subscribe to stay tuned. See you in the next video, where we'll continue witnessing the political moments shaping America's future.